who was the early national chair of the Indian Green Building Council, and I hope he is there among the participants today. And then, of course, Dr. Prem Jain. If it were not for the two of them, many of us would not have cemented these remarkable relationships that we have found, which has vested deeper meaning into our own pursuits in life. Amazing man Dr. Jain was. I'll leave that as that. And the other I must say is this. Shahrukh, to you, I will say, and I mean, but I mean, in response to what you said, but I will ask this question maybe of Mr. Beery. How do we sustain the good change we have all experienced post-COVID? It's impossible to forget the time at which we are meeting. The story continues. It's 3.5 million affected and about 200,000 dead in the world. India's figures are a lot more comforting, but we don't know where it's headed. In all this, it's hard not to acknowledge, as Shahrukh did in his way, you did, Mr. Beery, in the beginning, the reprieve, the relief the planet has got, her rivers have got, her forests have, and the skies over the last 2 months. It's nearly 60 days now. Someday, 30 years from now, someday, Mr. Beery, 30 years from now, those youngsters who are millennials and the Gen Z generation will look back at this amazing halt that the world has got. Will we get off this hurdle? Do you think we will go back to the insanity with all the abuse and the hubris of urban life and living? Do you think we will hide in the comfort of the other guy also doing what I do and so set the bad roller coaster back in action across India and the world? What do you think, Mr. Beery?
Mr. Hari, it is, post-COVID-19, with my limited understanding, it is going to be a reality. As we have faced, Spanish flu and different, pandemic in our earlier days, our forefathers have faced, I think we are going to face the same here. Because the kind of exploitation, the kind of one-upmanship, the kind of adharma, in our Indian philosophy, you say adharma. What we're supposed to have, the dharma. What is dharma? Dharma is essentially the truth, the justice, the fair play, the empathy and sympathy, and, that caring and sharing and giving.
Sure.
It is essentially the giving. But today, what happened to us? There is nobody to give. Everyone is crazily behind, every aspect he wanted to amass, and then amassing is also fine, but it doesn't mean he not only, he wants himself to become the rich at the cost of other poor. How can we accept 3% of the globe population controls the 90% of the wealth?
We understand that, but what do you see as the way forward post-COVID and post-lockdown? Do you believe we will go back to those bad old ways?
COVID-19, according to me, we need to adapt to our lifestyle to COVID-19. That's
your aspiration, Mr. Beery. Can I ask you, Brinda, do you believe the world will learn its lessons, or will it go back to those bad old ways? What's your take on this, Brinda? Good morning, Ashok Lal. Brinda, before you speak, we have got Ashok Lal finally here. Ashok, can you greet the rest of us, rest of the attendees?
Welcome, Ashok Lalji.
Greetings to everyone.
Greetings, thank you for being here. I thought technology had transformed things, to a point where we could all reach out quickly enough, but we had a challenge getting you today. I'll go back to Brinda. Sorry, please go on, Brinda.
Since I have spoken quite a lot in the beginning, Hari, why don't we get Ashok on?
Oh, and wonderful. Ashok, you heard my question. Yeah, fair enough. Thank you.
I had a question about whether you're going back after the COVID-19.
That's right.
Well, I can give you two broad perspectives. And I do hope that we take serious lessons and don't go back to business as usual. In the city of Delhi, we experienced a lifting away of the pall of pollution, of the noise and the congestion that had become the norm of the business as usual city extraordinarily busy, everybody running after whatever they can get. When this pall lifted, everyone in the city suddenly realized what the cost of this way of pursuit of wealth and the way of exploitation of natural resources causing. What is the loss that it has caused? You suddenly recovered your connect with the peace, with the beauty and the quietude of nature. That was a big thing that happened. Second thing that revealed itself was the brittle structure of our society, where we are clearly divided in two bits. There's one bit who provide through daily wage or short-term income all the services of getting things to you, making things and getting things to you, and they have no safety net. They are now living on alms, and they are on the verge of collapse. That's one side. On the other side, there's people like us who are sailing on the internet and looking up recipes and songs and God knows what else, ensconced in the wealth that we had accumulated earlier. So this is the other thing that has become so absolutely clear to everybody in the city. And so I do hope that as we go forward, we find ways of doing things, living lighter, living gentler, taking the cars off the street, returning to nature, and building the base of society so that the majority of our citizens have a rightful place in the urban economy and are secured in their home. And this requires a substantial rethinking and reorientation of our model of development. I do hope that this realization will take us in that direction.
Sure, thank you, Ashok, for that. Nearly all of us who are present on this platform today are from this sector, the construction sector, which employs today in India, I think it's the third largest employer at approximately 55, 60 million workers. And you know the sorry plight of many of them who have not been able to reach home yet. And there are monies that have not been paid as arrears go for 3 or 4 months of their wages. Now, if there are 2 or 3 sectors which are going to seriously be affected, this is one. The IT sector is not going to be hurt as badly. Like you said, some of us sail on the internet, and some of us, like you rightly said, are ensconced in wealth, quote unquote, that we have accumulated. Brinda, I'll turn to you now for your response to what this scenario is. And to my mind, this question is not about digressing or going away from the theme that Mr. Beria said today. Can someone mute your phone, please? We have a static coming over. Yeah. So the question is very relevant to what you spoke about earlier of spirituality in a certain sense, because without the good ethic of sustainability and of business practice, there isn't going to be that aspiration for spirituality being met. Does that make sense to you, Brinda?
Well, yes, very much so. I mean, I'm perhaps one of the oldest people on this webinar. And for many, many years, many of us have worked very hard to try and do certain things, many of which have not been successful. Unless there is political will and bureaucratic will, it is very, very difficult for individuals or groups of NGOs or even groups of professionals, especially professionals like us who are really very peripheral in many ways and should not be to society, to make any major difference. Let us take Dharavi, for instance. It is a long and old story. For years and years, there have been wonderful solutions from individuals, from colleges in Bombay, in Mumbai, from competitions that have been held around the world from people, the NGOs and activists within the Ravi itself, who have talked to the government for decades and decades to do something and work something and come out with a solution. But as long as there is greed and there is no political will, there was no solution. And for many reasons, that is why today cities like Mumbai are in this situation. And to take what Ashok said earlier, the tragedy of workers who really are the people who make everybody else's life workable, comfortable, and they are in this situation. The Ravi has a turnover and an income of over $1 billion a year. And look at their current state. So there is something terribly wrong because nobody is listening to anybody except what could be vote banks or what could be politically fortunate for certain people. And I don't know what the solution is. It's in many ways, it's rather despondent and sad. And the road ahead is confusing. But I would like to share one thought before I go off, because I've talked the most because of the issue that came up. Yesterday, we were having a talk, and one of the friends suggested that so that we never forget COVID-19, from now on, every year, we close down the world for 2 months a year so that we remember what happens during those 2 months. We see animals and birds everywhere. We see flowers coming out. We see sheep in a place in Glasgow going into a children's playground and getting on the merry-go-round and the seesaw. We see peacocks on the streets of Mumbai. We see flamingos filling the waterside along our city of Mumbai. So if we do this every 2 years, a memory that we should always remember that we cannot control this earth.
Sure. You remember that 1961 celebrated play called Stop the World, I Want to Get Off. In fact, the Beatles wrote a song also later, I think in 1965 or 66. Shahrukh, let me come to you on this one. You know, I remember you're telling me that to this day, as a bedside reader, you have Ramchandra Guha's book, How Much Should a Person Consume? Is that right?
Absolutely. Yes, yes.
Well, and I know that you also had a lot of such writings, including something that I was bringing out about that point of time, maybe 8-9 years ago. And there was a certain powerful resonate that happened in your mind every time you connected with some thought or the other. Yesterday, for instance, when I think it was Ashok who said that, and I'm paraphrasing him, and when I'm saying this, there is a materialistic base on which the spiritual is enacted, he said. How would you connect that, not to, you know, your work as an architect, but to this unprecedented situation that the world has and India has today?
Okay. Hari, can you all hear me?
Yes, please.
I'll just kind of do a quick kind of additions to both Ashok and Brenda's statement. And one of the things that kind of comes to mind, and I think it's a brilliant idea to kind of shut things down. And to add to that, what did we actually do? We did nothing. And just doing that nothing allowed a whole range of things that we had kind of pushed and worked for all the years through industrialization, or what have we, the left brain attitudes of where we needed to be. It just kind of changed the entire kind of scenario for us. So maybe the thing to do when we do shut down like this is to stop running behind things, to stop running, just, okay, running just for the sake of running, for good health, spirituality, connecting to the Gaia is wonderful. But a whole range of us get sucked into the day-to-day kind of living issues of life. And we seem to forget that while just slowing down, doing nothing will allow the world to repair itself. Because let's not forget, folks, we have a 3.4 billion years of intelligence embedded in the natural and the biological world. And it will take care of itself regardless of us. So that's to Brinda's point. When Ashok talked about laborers walking, of course, it's devastating. It reminded one of the partition and the movement of people at that point in time. Why did the migrant labor want to go back home? Tell me. Because that is where they felt that they will have empathy, that they will have understanding, that they will go back to living in dignity and not at the expense of the cities that have continued to exploit them. So I think those are amazing lessons for us to learn. And I don't think that the world, I'm an optimist. I don't think that the world will go back to business as usual. A lot of people will, but there is a great number of people where the COVID arrow has not only just affected on the outside, but it has kind of hit them in the right spot, in their heart. They would be in a position to kind of look at this. Now, to answer your question about, how much does one need? I think we've all realized that staying close with our families, what is it that we kind of are looking for? We're looking for love, some simple food, healthy habits, and things like that. And as we say that we are designers, may I offer a solution to all of us? I mean, it's not a solution, it's an idea. Every time that you get another project, folks, sit down with your client, work on the brief, and say, in your brief, can we expand facilities for people who take care of the campus, who keep it clean, the drivers, the housekeepers? Can we, the construction workers, can we kind of look at their existence in dignity? And then there is a chance that we might be in a position to kind of have a solution. And because if we are not going to be able to kind of do that as architects, as designers, people with a certain amount of influence, then I don't think we have solved of being architects.
Fair enough, Shahrukh. But let's look.
Mr. Hari,
yes,
I would like to, what Shahrukh has said. You see, I am also of the same opinion. It is so unfortunate that the main part is being played by our workers, and that workers are always in the receiving end. Why? They will never have a roof over their head. They're always on the move. I feel Government of India, should come out with a legislation whereby, suppose if they are sanctioned to ex-developer to build, say, 1,000 luxury houses or a flat, they must also build at least 10% of that houses, at their cost in the designated land, but whereby the land should come to them freely. The sanction cost and no GST, nothing of that sort. There is no income tax on that. But government should provide all this, but the developer should build, and they will get the occupancy certificate only upon completing those 10% also. Why can't we take the responsibility? And when we build the project, we create so much of a hassle to the neighborhood. Why can't we take that immediate neighborhood at least? What is being caused, the problem is caused by us. So we should find the rectification for that. The third aspect is the density of population. Can we control the density of population by, we know that X area can take so much, so much built space. And the moment it reaches that threshold point, we need to move out. We need to say that, no, this location has taken its toll. It is enough. Now we need to move, further. We need to expand the city, maybe a satellite township. So these are the, mainly I'm talking about the migrant laborers. The developer must build the houses for them. That is the only way we can address the issue.
Sure. I have one response that has come in from a wonderful architect that you all know of, Satyaprakash Varansi. He says, it's fine to reflect upon it all. I'm paraphrasing him, and I'm hoping I'm not offending him. How do we really go about bridging this chasm when we refer to sustainable living and say we need to do this or do that? Who is this we that we are talking about? What is that I can do as an individual, say starting tomorrow? That's his question. Ashok, would you want to respond to that, or Mr. Beery, you want to continue on that since you talked about the we? Is the question clear? He says,
not clear. Not clear.
Okay. Ashok, can you step in if you have understood what Satya was speaking about? Ashok?
You can repeat the question, Hari.
Okay. When we say we, who is this we? The second is, why don't we turn that to I as an individual and say that I will step out of my office or my home and starting tomorrow, do a few things to help migrants and a few others like that. He's provoking us for toward some action measures.
Well, you see, in this, what I have been always saying, of course, who is we? Actually, I is a part of we, so I is always a part of the we. So it is always individual commitment, collaborative effort, and a collective leadership. That is where we can, reach to our goal slowly and steadily.
Ashok, if you can unmute yourself, maybe you want to respond to both what Shahrukh offered and now Sadberi did. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
yes,
please,
sir.
we can.
Right. Yes, to build on what Berry just mentioned and to respond to Satya's point, I think the I is primarily responsible for owning up responsibility for making a change. But that responsibility of making a change can only happen through influencing and participating in collaborative work, whether outside of government or better still, inside of government. Things do not change sufficiently by individuated action. They change when the individual actions form part of a broader understanding in a direction set by society and institutions. So I think the role of the individual is to say that they are going to give their time and effort in building common knowledge, common policies, common institutions that redirect our pattern of development. That's the role of the individual.
Sure. If I were to speak in some ways for the large stakeholder group that actually finds the money, risks with loans, and then services their funding costs over time, you will then see that all those things that the four of you have offered doesn't really make sense. If I'm one of those builders, to take a very specific example, who has, let's say, on my debt book, about 500 crores, and an interest run of about 100 crores on that at 20%. Today, the government has only said that, well, we'll give you a reprieve. We will ensure that you don't have to pay, but they're not saying that the interest clock is going to stop. Now, you three are professionals, and the fourth builder professional, Mr. Beery, is not really a builder who he has always been debt-free, God bless him. He has managed his business in a way that he hasn't had to do the tiger by the tail sort of chase. What happens therefore to the builder who has to pay monies? I know of a very large builder here who has to pay a very large sum to his labor and workers. I'm speaking to him last week. I think 4 or 5 days ago, I was speaking to this guy, and he says, I have no way of paying this money. I sympathize with these guys. I have hundreds of them who, I owe money for as arrears for the last 3 or 4 months. Now, how do we, if we want to stop the work, if we want to give a holiday of 2 months, as Brinda said, and Shahrukh seconded, how do we manage this straddle with GDP and the insane chase that the world economy has? Remember, in 1970, we were $1 trillion, the world GDP. Today, we are $91 trillion. And what happened was that we had only 3% as an average GDP growth per annum. Every country which managed to do, say, 5%, they got to be heralded. Look at Africa and all its 50-odd nations, and you will see that consistently, all of them have 3 to 4% as GDP growth, while their population growth is in the region of about 1.5%, 2%. The story is no different in India. How do we break this economic riddle or wrangle? Anyone can take this, please.
Well, I'd like to share a couple of thoughts on this. I think now it has been reasonably researched and established that in the real estate business, there has been an awful lot of borrowing on the possibility of speculative profits. What we have found is that the market for the upper income and the upper middle income residential buildings, or for the international commercial renter or buyer, have dried up. What people actually need is affordable homes, simpler spaces, at smaller profit margins. So what has to really happen is the loans that are caught up today, it's not only a short-term question of whether you're able to pay off the labor because they're engaged on your projects today, but company after company after company across India that have been engaged in real estate has fallen foul simply because they were chasing speculative wealth. So I think that model has to be given up. I think it become real. If investment is real, if it provides for real needs, not speculative needs and speculative wealth, we will restructure the distribution of wealth through the building industry. That is, I believe, as Mr. Berry says, that if you are able to build, in my opinion, smaller projects, wherever they are needed, with small guilds, bunch of 20, 30, 40 people who know how to build well, efficiently, and they use all kinds of...
Fair enough. Let me ask you...
Better industry.
If I'm a youngster today, doing my semester 8 or 9 as an architect, I'm an engineer, and we are producing about 1 million graduates every year as engineers go. We have about 1.5 million MBA professionals or graduates who come out. What happens to these guys over the next year, year and a half? What is the career trajectory looking like to you? Anyone can take this, please. I'm asking Ashok, but anyone can step in.
I think there's a little bit of historical background to this. The production of the engineering graduate, people in law, and people in management,
right,
has been riding a tiger from the past.
Right.
It's about the expansion of formal trade, formal industry, formal business, where these jobs will be created. What we're now finding is that that pattern of formal trade and business has been of two kinds. It has been, on the one side, of very high levels of investment in large infrastructural projects, which have to take risk. On the other hand, it's been on consumptive cultures, motor car, fashion, whatever you. What I think we have to now put our engineers and our management folk for, and even our legal experts for, is entrepreneurship to serve real needs. Hari, you can say something about that.
Well, I'll resist just now. Let me see if I can ask Brinda to take this. Snehal and Siddesh, I hope Ashok Lal has sort of offered you some insight into this. Over to you, Brinda. Are you there? Okay. Since she's still there, she is. Yeah. Okay, go on, Brinda. There you are.
There are no easy answers to anything.
Sure.
I mean,
Absolutely.
if we could solve all our solutions on a webinar, we would be very, very lucky people.
Of course.
And I do realize that that there are many points of view, and it's very important for us to hear the points of view. My sense that our weakness has come in a way because of what Ashok also mentioned. We cannot be eyes. We have to be collaborative. We have to work together as groups. As long as we see builders on one side of the fence and activists on the other side of the fence, the government on the third side, we're not going to be able to come out with anything good, whether it's affordable housing or anything else. We all very know the tragedy that took place for our mill districts in Mumbai. And of course, we all, with the Charles Correa recommendation, we lost the case in the Supreme Court, which should never have happened. And the entire area, the developers won. At that time, I remember thinking, why don't we all talk to each other? Why don't the developers and the activists and the government sit across and work together like they do even in cities like New York today? I mean, look at that High Line. It was an old tram line. Station, and look what developers together with activists, with landscape artists, with the bureaucrats did together. As long as we all think that we have different goals, different futures, we are not going to be able to come up with solutions. So the most important thing is to come up with a white paper or a sort of ecological constitution. What do we believe that nature and the ecology should be? What is the constitution of our country for these things, not just for democracy or for political things? What is the constitution for nature, for ecology, for sustainability? And how do we all work together and believe we belong? That constitution is part of our lives. Only then will a mindset change come and will a genuine change come. Until that happens, we're all going to be working at different
Sure.
objectives.
Sure. Ashok, you asked me if I want to respond to that question. I'll put it this way, like we all know, you have to go back to the roots of these things before you want to actually seek solutions. Look at the 2,800 or 2,900 mini hydel projects that are coming up in Arunachal Pradesh in a very, very highly vulnerable tectonic zone. No one stopped that. In the Garhwal and the Kumaon region, more in the Garhwal region, I will say, of Badri, Kedar, and the Yamunotri and Gangotri, we are finding that a similar pattern is emerging where numbers of dams, large ones, have been built, and that is causing a great deal more geological stress as well as environmental stress. Look at central India. Look at those 4 states. Somebody has to mute your system, please, because we are hearing a static. If you look at that region, the coal belt, shall we say, of Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh and, even parts of Madhya Pradesh and, of course, Bihar, you know that we have to find ways of getting away from this terrible obsession with fossil fuels. I'm not saying that we have solutions like Brinda said. But if we have these 400 odd participants here today listening in, we know that they all have their compulsions, shall we say, economic, while they understand that they want to get out of this kind of a situation where, like Raj Menon just now is writing in, that we all seek together a happiness coefficient. We know the small model that Bhutan came up with, and I can tell you honestly that it hasn't been the very best. I mean, if you looked at it at close quarters, what's and all. So the question to all of us is, if Brinda says that we need to have an ecological constitution, Shahrukh, to you I'm asking, there must be a way of us all as opinion makers, decision influencers, as business people, to be able to take it up with the government with one voice, with unison. You know that there are people from the, shall we say, the extreme right. I'm not a political animal, but I will say that there are people who will want to root for business without any holiday. Forget 2 months. They will want to have 14 months in a year, Shahrukh. What would you think we should do if we want to build that ecological consciousness while we have economic compatibility? Shahrukh, you have to unmute. Yeah.
Okay, can you all hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Right. I think all the issues that we now, Hari, there are no easy answers. We really need to kind of dig deep, see the connections. But I think becoming aware, a lot of us have been listening to a whole range of things, but honestly, becoming aware of issues that we need to kind of grapple with, maybe look at some big picture and then come down and see whether we can focus on doing small things that will build up the confidence that we've all lost. Not the confidence to be able to kind of go back into the same kind of scenario that we wanted to do, because less definitely is the new more. Small spaces, meaningful spaces for each one of us, I think become the this thing. And I think to see infinite growth on a finite planet, I think that clearly indicated
Absolutely.
how suicidal we could be. So at the other end of the spectrum, we need to listen to voices that are warning us actually. They are raising the red flag. Yuval Harari, Vandana Sehwag, Greta Thunberg, they're all kind of saying that if it is capitalism brings out capitalists.
Right.
Maybe we've kind of run that route. Maybe it will still continue to kind of flow. But I think we need to look at humanism, where we kind of last start to listen to the larger voices that we don't hear.
Sure.
So I think this is what we will probably do. On the idea of buildings and spaces, I think one thing very clear, and we've already started doing this in a small way in Bangalore. Designers and builders will need to look at repurposing their buildings, repurposing their architecture.
Yeah.
And I think once we kind of look at those possibilities, some might work, all might not, but I think there is a way for us to be able to kind of look forward.
Good.
Yeah.
Hari, can we now start with the question and answer?
Yeah.
Take a few questions from the...
I've been doing that already. You're not noticing it.
Okay.
I will ask you now, Mr. Beery, back to you, Syed. You said 3% of these people who are investors are the big monsters who hold the reins on the world's wealth and do this very post-liberalist post-1970s kind of exploitation that the world has had. Do you believe, therefore, this is a game played out by this, I would say, 1% of investors who hold nearly 80% of the world's wealth, and we need to now move away from this model into a model where there is no chasing of GDP at all?
Thank you very much, Hari sir, for posing this question. This is to always, prick my conscience. To be honest, the entire economy, what I understand is, it is made up of interest. If you see, for example, I'm talking about, this glass what I'm wearing. Suppose if it is worth 25,000 rupees, if you take the interest part out, it must be not more than 3,000 or 4,000 rupees altogether. So imagine the moment the rate comes down, then the affordability will become, the pyramid, the bottom of the pyramid can afford. So what is important here is the interest. We must come out from the interest and we must go in for the equity. I will tell you almost to substantiate that in the world, 90% of the banks are controlled by the Jewish people. But if you notice their own lifestyle, among themselves, there is no interest at all. They never believe in interest at all because they know for sure interest is a killer. It should be equity. Equity, leads to prosperity, and interest leads to exploitation. Nothing more, nothing less.
Ashok, I will ask you back again. We are running at the last 5 minutes or so of this. Like Gurmeet said, let's stick to a hard stop at 12:30, even if we start a little late. Thank you, Gurmeet, for being there. To you, Ashok, you said that this is not about value creation in terms of money, but this is about value creation in terms of wealth. I remember a lady called Martha something or the other who wrote a book called The Value of Everything about 15 years ago. What would your response to be? I can see that there is a sort of a natural, flow to what Shahrukh said and to what Said Berry just now said. What is your take on it, Ashok? Okay, he's still not unmuting. Maybe, yeah, there he is. There he is.
Yeah, I think you're right about the concepts of wealth as being distinguished from notions of money.
Sure.
Money, especially if it is earned on heavy interests, is a security which is bought for the unknown future.
Sure.
It is not what itself defines quality of life.
Agree with you.
It's about the quality of life. And I think one point that needs to be really emphasized is that unless the models of economic development put the distribution of wealth through the mechanisms that produce wealth themselves as the topmost priority, we are not going to get a repaired society. And this mode of development, which looks at the distribution of wealth, it means enabling people who are at the moment disadvantaged to live a gracious, simple, comfortable life, secure life, and then taxing heavily those who are into extremely exploitative forms of living. I think that reconstruction definitely requires to happen, and that is where I think the meaning of wealth has to change.
Brinda, your take on this, on the value of everything.
It's a really difficult question because I think that this, the biggest problem is this 1% who own the 90%. But I think that the 1% then have a huge responsibility. And the responsibility has to go beyond the workplace. The responsibility has to go by the way they talk, by the way they live, by the actions. I mean, if we have these huge, we know we have a huge economic disparity in our country. But if we can have people who have 500,000 square feet and people who have 10 square feet to live in, that sort of disparity should not exist in a country like ours. When we have the COVID going on, we can't be spending huge amounts of money on projects that are not meaningful or not necessary at this time. So I think this is a moral question, morality and a moral question at this time. We have to go back to our roots and believe what is the right way to go. What are our right values that our country always had for thousands of years? And what are we doing now?
Sure. Yeah, that's a nice, concise, whatever, sum up there. What I will say is this, before I invite Mr. Beery for one kind of a roundup, I will only say this, that this insane chase from 1970s, $1 trillion of our GDP to $91 trillion now has to be reversed. There was a man called Manzoor Hussain Khan. He wrote a book called The Third Wave. We had invited him at the IGBC, and many of you IGBC members will remember at one of these congresses, I can't remember how many years ago, and he spoke of how we can't continue to carry this deception of building on wealth that does not exist. Brinda just now said that it's a sort of a combination of moral, spiritual, ethical, sustainable. Now, this spiritual and sustainable are two sides of that coin. We all know that. If we know how to do this battle on the economic front, I think we'll get there. Over to you, Mr. Beery, for your last notes, after which we close. Thank you, all of you attendees who are still there.
Thank you, Hari. Just, when I've been listening to the stalwarts, I have concluded in this way, the mysteries, Shah Rukh mysteries, insight where he mentioned of the dignity of life. For that, I'm adding, Shah Rukh, with your permission, dignity of labor, dignity of life, and dignity of death. Because it is ultimately the death, by death we can see the kind of life what he has led. So it is a dignity of, both the labor, life, and the death. And you also mentioned very nicely, less is more. And even Mr. Shirke also said a note on that, the less is more. When it comes to Ashok Lal, the sharing and caring, and he brought the quality of life, from the dignity of life. Ashok Lalji has brought the quality of life, and the last word of taxing the the rich and the famous, I really, really endorse. Finally, our Brinda Madam, amazing thing, whatever you said, you are given a practical solution, because we always try to find the solution in crossroads. We are in a different direction and we're trying to find a solution. You are absolutely right that unless and until the developer, the government, the bureaucracy, and the architect, because you are the creator of the world, God has blessed you with that. When all these stakeholders comes together and then come out with a solution, and that solution should be just and inclusive. So that is the one aspect I like. And the last word, what you said, give a holiday. Why not we give a holiday for 2 months? Honestly, they want to break the, what is that? Break the, for the COVID, what we say, sir? Break the chain. Break the chain. So I endorse Brinda that yes, we must break it. 10 months of hard work, 2 months of, break. Thank you very much for all the participants. Thank you very much for our wonderful speaker. Even though initially we had a little teething issue, finally we managed it well. And once again, I wish you all the very best and good luck and God bless. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, all of you. Yes,
All right.
Thank you.
The link will be available. Please check IGBC.in tomorrow, day after. It should be there. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Shah Rukh.
Thank you. Thank you.